So, hey, Jeremiah, I gotta believe that you are named after Robert Redford's Jeremiah Johnson. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true. So yeah, my dad loved the movie. There's a lot of
Okay.
Jeremiah Johnsons out there in the world, believe it or not,
Yep.
and we're all the same age. We're all
Yeah.
45 to 50 years old. And
So you think it
so
was your
yeah,
dad that you think it was your dad that loved Robert Redford? And
well,
I feel
it's a
like maybe it might have been your mom.
yeah, no, it probably I that may be true. I just the story I guess I've always rolled with it was that it was dad's decision. I don't know that I've ever heard what the real truth is, but you just got to believe that the name was given to me for a reason.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty badass, and you seem to kind of carry the heritage of a Jeremiah Johnson, and do the name well. So I reached out to Jeremiah just because I enjoy his beer immensely. He's just a local guy here, and I just thought, we kind of get sucked into this silo of thinking about education, and we talk to educators and we talk to people who eat, sleep, and breathe education. But Kasey and I also believe deeply that there's just a lot of other people who can speak into education and bring their experiences and what they kind of soak in and help us get better at what we do. So we
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on. I'd love for you just to kind of give a brief overview of who you are and what you do. And then what we wanted to do and what we try to do is just take ideas and concepts and have a conversation about them.
My entrepreneurial dreams were there, and somehow I convinced my wife to empty out our savings, which wasn't a lot, and roll the dice. And here we are. This is our seventh year in business, and it's a dogfight every day, but we're doing really well.
I didn't know until you and I spoke, and I started just kind of digging into your history a little bit, um, that you bought a brewing company and then changed it to Jeremiah Johnson. Uh,
Yeah,
and so that intrigued me, and I'm going to try and make this connection because you had to take an existing identity, an existing established company, and
yes,
rebrand it as, I mean, actually your own. You put your name on it.
yeah,
And principals and teachers, we do that not as aggressively, but we come into a new building, we replace an old teacher, we replace an old principal, and we take this existing identity, good or bad, imperfect or perfect, and we are asked to shift it. Talk to me a little bit about that shift of personality that or identity that you had to take something that was existing and put something else in place and convince everybody that this is better. What was that
yeah.
process like?
It's terribly difficult, and I had a lot of people who, I mean, at least in my mind, I had a lot of people who didn't think that was the right decision. But technically, what we had done is, so I ran the Front Brewing Company for the last 18 months of its existence. And it was during those 18 months that I was, trying to put together my financing package to actually acquire technically the assets of the company. I actually did not buy the company. I bought the two breweries they owned and the building they owned. But it really, initially, as we were finalizing that purchase, we were not gonna change the brand. We were gonna just create a new look for the Front. But, I went on this search to find a designer who could kind of give it a fresh new look, and it was actually, a guy named Cody Small, who I still talk to pretty much weekly. He's my anything I do with design, he does. Him and his firm, they ran us through the gauntlet of branding exercises and all this and all that, and he made a comment to me because it was the Front Brewing Company, and he said, "Think of a brand you use in your everyday life that starts with the word 'the.'" And, of course, I'm like, "Alright," and just couldn't. I mean, I was like, I guess there aren't brands. The would be the Front sounded more like a bar. And so then he hit me with, "Why don't you use your name? You have a legendary name for a beer company. It looks great in print." And, Honestly, my wife's initial reaction was absolutely not. We live in a small town that seems very ego driven or something like that. And that was probably my biggest concern, because I had worked in a public, I was at the development authority. I was often at commission meetings and in the newspaper, whatever. So I was really concerned with, coming across in a way that, wouldn't be flattering. And but I also knew that it was gonna take everything I had to, financially and physically and emotionally to build my dream. And so Katie and I went and had a couple drinks at a golf course, and we called him back. We said, "Let's go." And we right then and there we focused in on changing the brand name. And so by the time we rolled the brand out in August of 2018, the brand was built, and it was a big success. Changing the name. There were certainly people who didn't like that, but I'm a big believer that if you keep your head down, work hard, and put out a great product, and always do your best and treat people right, time kind of figures all that stuff out. So, and that's what I felt happened.
So, Jeremiah, this Brian and I sometimes release episodes that we call barstool episodes, and it's like we used to do back in the old days when we'd be drinking a beer and just talking education, and just whatever comes to mind is what we talk about. This feels like the truest barstool episode we've had, where we're talking to a
Yeah.
brewer, and I absolutely love that. What is missing, of course, is the beer, but maybe we'll fix that sometime. Uh,
Yeah, sure. We'd love that.
so I have a couple of questions I want to ask, but let's start with this one because you talked so much about the role that others have played in your success. Now, obviously, you're the center of that, and it doesn't happen without you. But wh- what what are some of the things that you think are key or most important to be able to work successfully with others? Because we talk about collaboration all the time in education. It's a buzzword, but it often fails. It doesn't do the job. It doesn't create something better than the individual work that's being done. So, what made your collaboration successful? What are the keys to it?
Or give us a juicy one where it didn't work.
Sure.
Yeah. Collaboration is so essential for success, but I do think it's so difficult. I think just the world we live in is, I'm not saying it's more difficult than it was 40 or 50 years ago, but it's challenging. There's no question that everybody, most people I come across in a day are facing some sort of challenge, whether others know it or not. And so, I think I've one of my, I'm not, I'm not like overly skilled in any certain area, but I think one thing I've always been good at is creating a connection with people. And I think on at least on our team, and I'd even say with my bank, my insurance, my vendors, I've been really strong in the area of creating connections with people. And I think when you create a true connection with someone and you understand their point of view and they understand your point of view, then you get to a level of trust. And I think when I just think of education and I think of kids, because I have a kiddo who's in a lot of youth sports, and I see all these kids all the time, and I see the not necessarily the teachers, but I see the coaching, and I just think when I'm standing there watching it, when I see success, it's because there's this trust. And when I see like maybe struggling or a situation where the kids aren't really paying attention, or it's because I don't feel that level of trust has been built. And so I'd say in my own business life, um, just kind of putting everything aside and like really listening to your employees, obviously choosing the right people to be part of your team. But I think, like, I believe, you'd have to talk to my team, but I believe I have quite a few people who work for me who are, like, all in. Like, they've bought completely into what we're doing, and that took time and this, like, building of trust.
I'm going to ask us to do a little something, and I want to build off of that because you say a lot of things that leaders understand. And I'm saying leaders is in terms of parents and teachers and principals, which is in order to grow or to move or to get people in working in a cohesive direction, we have to put aside our differences. Not that we put aside that we don't bring them to the table, but they're not priority, right? This is my difference. This is what I think. It's going to impact the way that I want to move forward, but I'm not going to choose that over what we are collectively doing. And then you also say this: choose the right people. Sometimes, at least in education, we have this concept that it's addition by subtraction. That sometimes getting rid of wrong people adds more to the group than them staying, right? So even though we missed the
Yeah.
person, we missed their working hands, their absence and the attitude and the toxicity that they bring is so negative that
Yes.
just it leaving is positive. But this is what what I dreamed in this conversation is I want to know, like, when you think of the brewing process, there's something attractive to me about considering kids like a brewing process, right? Like, if you mess up certain ingredients, your batch is terrible, right? So,
Yeah, I
uh,
mean,
like, talk
yeah.
to me about the importance of, like, because you can show up as a teacher and just be super fun and everyone loves you, but you don't do anything of quality.
Yeah, of
But in
course.
beer, in order to have a quality beer, you have to be super intentional about detail. So talk to me just a little bit about like that. Go ahead, Kasey.
Let me jump in, and I think you'll be able to answer my question as well, because
Kasey thinks he's smarter than me. This is what he does.
yeah, no. Here's in education, what we struggle with, I think, is the science of teaching and then the creativity of it. And there absolutely has to be a true process and science to brewing, but also you're trying to create something new and unique. And I think that's the struggle that I'd like to hear you talk about. And I do think that applies to the classroom as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna give a shout out to, I mentioned working at the Great Falls Development Authority, and I worked there a while, and I worked for Brett Doney, who many people know, he's in the news all the time, and he's a tough guy to work for, but, like, the first, I don't know, probably the first month I worked there, he made a comment to me, and it was just something, it's a term everybody's heard. The devil is in the details. And I don't know, when he said that to me, it just like never left my brain. Like, the devil's in the details. And so that was years and years ago. But when I got into business, and of course, I'm learning on the fly. There was a lot of time early on and still today where, I'm learning like as it's happening. But the thing that I've probably stressed most on the brewing side is the devil is in the details. And let me tell you, it truly is. The smallest mistake will ruin the batch. And then what's challenging for anybody who's a small company, no matter the industry, but for us specifically, when you're a small craft brewer, um, one bad batch can bury your company. So you gotta make really tough decisions. I think every brewery at some point has probably screwed up a batch of beer, and we're right there with everyone. And, as an owner, you also have to make this tough decision. And hopefully I've always made the right one, is although it's gonna cost you dearly financially, you have to pour that beer out. Because if it gets out in the market and, it's gonna hurt your brand. And so
Kasey,
on our
what
team.
would be that? I love that analogy. I really do.
Yeah,
And I run a small business, and I understand that, like, in small businesses, small mistakes that have big consequences, you almost want to like try and ride it through, right? Like, how can I not
yeah.
throw out this batch? Kasey, what would be that? What is that application to a classroom? I'm trying to figure out what that would be. That, like, this small
So
mistake, you want to keep writing it out. You got to just throw it out. What would that be?
yeah, so I do have a couple. I was thinking about this. First of all, education. There are these weird protections in place where the kids have to show up tomorrow, right? Your customer doesn't have to show up tomorrow.
Right.
So teachers can make a mistake. But here's the other, and the kids have to show up. So there's some security in that, and I think it's actually harmful because I think teachers can continue to do
Yeah.
some of the same, make
We
some of the
blame the
same poor
customers. That's
choices.
the biggest difference.
Right.
We blame customers.
But here's the other thing that I was thinking about is, um, I wonder, and I'll tell you why I'm thinking about this. I wonder if you've ever had a batch that you threw out that it hurt you because you thought this was the thing. Because I think a lot of teachers have, we call them, their pet projects or their pet lessons, and they love teaching it, but it really doesn't make sense in that class. But they hang on to it dearly because it means so much to them, even if it's not what's best for kids. And so I'm going to imagine that you've experimented a little bit with some beers, and you're like, this is going to be the one, but you've had to make that tough choice. Is that something you've experienced, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I mean, nowadays we're so fortunate. We have two breweries. So in Great Falls, what we do is we produce our core packaged, mass-produced products. And so we don't, now we don't. I mean, it's the same thing every single day. We're brewing Mountain Man, Hazy, or Blonde, or Citra, or Vanilla Porter, or Drift Boat, or something. But we do have that secondary brewery in Whitefish, which is really a test. It's really, we call, it's like our laboratory, really. Now, I got some really smart people working for me there. And so they tend to technically do things very, very spot on. But there's no question, we do a ton of experimentation. We'll probably brew upwards of 40 different styles per year in Whitefish.
And you just test it in the market there? Is that what you do?
We sell it primarily in the building in Whitefish. So it's
cool.
very unique. I mean, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in more locations here in time. But so in Whitefish, every single day we have 7 beers on draft that are our core beers that are produced here in Great Falls. But we also have 7 or 8 beers that are only produced in Whitefish, and pretty much, for the most part, 95% of that beer is sold in that building. We do funnel some of it to our Coeur d'Alene location, and then we've started to get a little bit of it here coming to Great Falls, like, a couple kegs a month. And those are all specialty beers, and we go into every one of those not knowing what the outcome will be. Now, the guy heading that up is really bright and really scientific and technical, and so he tends to hit a lot of home runs. But
can you? I love that idea, and I think I'm going to build off of Kasey's question, because there's something that I'm like itching at, which is in your entrepreneurial world, you can have a conviction or like this dream of like, this is awesome. Trust me, guys, this is awesome. But if the customer says no, if you dig in your heels, you go for broke, right? Like if the customer says, I don't like it, you either have to say, I'm putting my financial backing behind this, believing that over time it will happen, or you have to get rid of your pet project. And to Kasey's point, educators, we don't have to do that. Because my students will show up tomorrow, and if they don't show up tomorrow, then you're the problem. And so we do have this, I think, problem in education where we don't necessarily have a customer base that feeds our change and creativity. So talk to me about, I'm sure you had moments where you have thought to yourself, if I want to pay rent next month, if I want to, I have to shift what the customer wants. How do you do that and maintain Jeremiah Johnson identity?
Yeah, we actually face that. I mean, I feel like we are facing that situation every single day. I feel like yesterday I had a conversation along these lines. While we experiment and make all these unique beers in Whitefish, and that's really cool and really unique, and frankly, an opportunity most of our competitors don't have. At the end of the day, the customers have to buy the beer. And so we can make all the crazy beers we want, but admittedly, there are styles sometimes that are made that are clunkers. They just don't sell like Mexican lager. I know we can make Mexican lager, and we're going to sell 2 kegs of it a day in Whitefish. I know that. But, then we try a margarita goza or something, and it's, the brewer's into it. He's very, excited about doing it. It sounds fun, and who doesn't love in a spring day, the taste of a margarita, and it's kind of a salty beer product there. But the truth is, for every 200 cervezas I'm going to sell one of those. So we have clunkers, and we try to strategize to not have them, and to try to focus on, high volume sellers. Um, it's something we like I say, we talk about it all the time.
Do you ever feel like your statement just right there, we focus on high volume sellers?
Yeah, you
Financially, it
have
makes
to.
a ton of sense. Do you ever sense, and I'm thinking about an education, where if we focus on high volume sellers or things that work, things that teachers buy and districts buy, like it seems to work over and over and over again. The palate for everybody seems to be agreeable. Kasey, is it wrong to say that at times those feel watered down and not unique? So there's there's that struggle of like, everybody wants it, but is it the best beer? Bud Light
Yeah,
sucks, but it's one of the number one selling beers, right? Like, you know what I'm saying?
yeah. The best products aren't the best sellers. That's the
Yeah,
reality.
yes, and I don't love that, because it's in beer and it's in education. So
Here's what I would say the analogy in education might be. It's about what's being measured. And if you're measuring in sales, in this case, Bud Light wins, which is dumb, but it does, right? But I think in the classroom, when we're measuring in content versus development of the human, you make a different choice. And I think that's very unfortunate. I think it's part of the struggle of education, is that we're trying to develop a whole person, but the tests are measuring one specific skill. And I don't know if it looks quite like that in the brewing, but here's how I want to ask you a question I think that is related to that. Because in education, we're having to decide what processes do we protect, and is there room for innovation? I always just got bored by the second semester, and I would try things out. And I was a risk taker, but not everybody is that way. So I guess my question to you then, Jeremiah, is like, when you look at what you're producing, what criteria are you using when you say, you know what, right now it's time to protect the product. This product is as it should be. We have to keep producing it in this way. Versus, when are you deciding, all right, it's time to get a little creative and be innovative? Because I do think even in the world of education, those two concepts sometimes come into conflict.
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like we're kind of protecting what we do now, just because, I'm sure you guys watch the news, and we all see what's going on. Economic times are, I think most people would agree, like a trip to the grocery store is eye-opening, to say the least, at this point.
what $100 looks like in my grocery cart is
Yeah,
depressing.
it's ridiculous. I mean, you know, I just I do the shopping for my family, and uh, I go to the store, and I have no idea how most of these people are paying for their groceries because it's changed. It's extremely expensive to feed a family, and but anyways, that kind of trickles down to beer. I mean, you know, beer sales are down, and there's this new wave of mocktails and NA beers and all those things, and those are great, and they certainly, it's you know people are always going to make those choices, but I think, and this is like this is just like what's in my head. When sales of our industry have been down, I feel like the big boys start a lot of innovation. Suddenly you're seeing, you know, every single product with a Bud Light brand on it. And you're seeing, all kinds of new ready to drink cocktails or new styles of beer that they're trying to attract. And those are the big companies that are backed with, big time capital. For us, we're just an independent company, and we certainly can't make a decision like that because it costs a ton of money to put a new product on the market. So rather than throw new things, we've had to really lean into our identity of no nonsense Montana beer. And kind of by no nonsense Montana beer, at least from our core side, Brewed in Great Falls side, we're not producing anything new. And the distributors, it drives them nuts. They're like, what do you got that's new? And it's like, we don't have anything that's new. And because we're having to lean into our classic style of what we do, and our classic styles are going to stand the test of time, because we all know that, economic times are cyclical. They will change. Things will be better at some point, and people will, I also believe, like, the whole world is not going to start drinking non-alcoholic beer every Friday night. It just,
Certainly
that
hope not.
they don't. We in Whitefish, we have a big spot, and at some point everyone was like, you got to make a non-alcoholic beer. And I was like, yeah, we should. And then I looked at the numbers for a whole year, and it was like, we sold like 2,200 kegs or something through the year in that establishment. And I was like, how many non-alcoholic beers did we sell? Because we sell that Athletic Brewing Company non-alcoholics. And, the people who want those, and I've had a few myself, but I looked, and over the whole year, it would have only accounted to 14 kegs. So I had to make it, that made the decision easy. Am I going to go make a new product when over the whole year I'm going to sell not even a whole batch? It's like such a small percentage of overall sales. So, I think in our world, we're kind of doing that now. We're kind of holding the line, and just our focus every day is make our product the best we can make our product, and just make sure we're really tuned into those details, the devil's in the details thing. Yeah, I mean, and then I'm kind of on the other side of it. I can tell a story of when we did innovate is in 2019. I was only in business 1 year at that point, but I had 3 years of experience because I was running the front. And hazy beers were, I started drinking them other places. I'm like, man, these are delicious. I love these. And everybody was kind of getting into these hazy beers. And I went to our team and I said, we have to develop a hazy beer, a hazy IPA, and we're going to do it. And what a year that was, because in 2019, we brewed 19 batches of hazy IPA, which is a lot of beer. I mean, that's our tanks hold about 120 kegs each. So we did that 19 times. We brewed that beer 19 different ways. Like, we were trying to innovate and get it right. And like, finally, I think by the time we did it the 19th time, that's when we settled on the recipe that we use today. And so,
Yeah, there's
that was,
Jeremiah, I
yeah,
love all of those stories. I think that there's a lot of relatability to people, to educators. I love that concept that when times are tough, I know for my own self, but I also know for educators, when times are tough, we throw a lot of ideas at the wall, and we're like, okay, we got to shift, we got to do something new, we got to, and that's kind of makes it feel better because you see things moving and you see change, and so you feel like you're progressing. But I think at times, to your point, you lose your core of no nonsense beer, right? Like, in all of this innovation to try and you're losing your core. And Bud Light, they suffered that. We all know this story a couple of years ago,
yeah,
right? When they tried to do this new brand and it really, really suffered. Instead of just saying, no, who are we? Like, in this tough time, who are we going to be, and what is our brand? And I think that educators and principals and administrators can need to learn that when times are tough, what is our brand? What are we going to reduce ourselves to say, no, this is who we are and this is how we're going to weather the storm. But I also love the innovative part of, you believed, again, you went to your core, we have to have something, and it took you 19 times to find that. I don't know if myself or other educators are that patient to try 19 times, to fail 18 times before you find the thing that you're like, yes, this is it.
Hey, I gotta admit, I don't know if it was patience or stupidity it cost us, but I just believed in that. I knew it. I was like,
Yeah.
Hazy IPA is going to be here, and it's
Yeah.
not gonna be a flash
I
in the
love that.
pan.
Here's what I was thinking about as you were telling that story about what you're choosing to do in these economically difficult times. And what I think is, and to your point, the mistake that others make is they search for an answer to make up for that. And that's absolutely what we're doing in education. We've seen a shift in our demographics. We've seen some changes in our scores. And what we're doing is very often is we're searching for the next curriculum but I think the answer is right here in the house. Let's look at what our best attributes are, and let's really focus in on that. And you shouldn't be growing and bringing more things in these difficult times. You should be shrinking down a little bit.
I just, I have a sixth grader, and so I know what's going down. I see the things, I hear the stories, and I go to the parent teacher conferences, and I see things at the school, and I am fortunate. I get to drop my kiddo off most days, so I see a lot. And yeah, I think that's a great way to go for education. No nonsense.
The other thing I was going to say about the story is you talk about that iterative process where I'm just curious, like, did you think the first batch of hazy beer was going to be perfect? I think there's a lesson to be learned from that for educators is please go in believing that this is going to be the thing, but also be fully prepared to make an adjustment, which I assume is what you did with that hazy.
Well, entrepreneurs, and I drive around a lot because we sell beer in all these places, and a lot of the markets I drive to. So I do listen to like business podcasts and like people who've found great success. And, I don't think there's any like specific, like key ingredient, but I've become this way as an entrepreneur. I don't know that I was this way before I started. But you have to develop, if you're going to make it, unless you're just like a Powerball winner or your grandpa invented, Scotch tape or something, you have to have unwavering belief that you're going to succeed. And I will fully admit and tell you guys, there have been many numbers of days in our first 7 years where it was close to the end. I mean, but you just got to kind of, it's so hard. I can't even verbalize it because it's almost like some of the stuff that you have to go through to make it. It's almost like unless you've lived it, you wouldn't even believe it. And so I do think to be a successful entrepreneur, and build your own thing, you have to be so certain that you will have eventual success, that you will never quit, that you absolutely, no matter what, like my business could go bankrupt tomorrow and I will be back the next day rebuilding it. Like you cannot quit. And it's fun too. You're inspired. I mean, there's no doubt, like every morning I wake up and I have no lack of gas in the tank. Like I'm energized to go make this happen. So I do think like you have to have this unwavering certainty of eventual success.
I think I love what you're talking about right now because we see in education a shift into emphasizing the trades, right? We got away from the trades, and now we're going back into the trades. And I actually would like to, and maybe this is my ignorance of understanding. I actually would either put alongside that or add to that entrepreneurship, right? And that's a word that I can't say in my Midwest mumbling mind, but
Yeah.
but you just kind of to me highlighted three things, because my question to you that was growing was, what are things that you think educators should be focusing on in order to encourage and inspire and train the next entrepreneur? There it is. And I wrote down three, and I would be curious if you can go back into your middle school, high school brain and your process, and if you thought, man, if a teacher gave me these three things or emphasized these three things, I either would have done this faster or I wouldn't have so many bumps in the road. But if I'm also missing something, let me know. But I wrote down, you just wrote down, or you said that you needed to have absolute certainty. So emphasizing in students that, man, when you have this thing, you have to have certainty. And certainty doesn't mean you don't change or shift or make mistakes. It's certainty that I am going to make it. I'm not going to fail. You have to have certainty. You've talked a lot about clarity, no nonsense. You can be certain, but if you don't know what you're certain of, then you're going to waffle. You're going to go, I'm going to be successful, but I'm going to keep throwing darts into the dark. And then I can't even read my own handwriting. Oh, but you mentioned this in the very beginning. You also need to have hard work. You have to show up and kick ass today. You can't sleep in till 10:30. You can't decide to not work today. Those are my three pillars. Am I missing anything?
No, those three things are so instrumental in my everyday life. You know, I'm a father, and you know, we're fortunate. You know, we can give our kiddo a lot of opportunity in life. But man, if she should come on here and talk to you guys, because she would tell you, my dad never stops talking about outworking people and working hard. And it's a true belief. Like, the most talented people in the world are not the most successful people in the world. The hardest workers tend to rise to the top. And then to go along with it, those two other points, you know, I think in the education system and working with kids, I mean, you know, kids aren't, I don't know many kids who, when they're young, are like super sure of themselves, or what their talent is, or what they can achieve. I think that's something that's developed over time. And I think, you know, just like, I can relate it to coaching sports. Um, you got to pump these kids up. You got to make them believe that they can achieve things. It's just like, I believe people are good by nature. They want to achieve. They want to do good. They just need help, like, believing that they can do it, and also knowing what they're going to do. Uh, you have to have a direction. I think for many people that's very difficult. I know so many people who are successful at a job that they don't want to do. And, you know, I've been in those positions too, but like, the three things I would say is motivating, put in the work, the true effort, like, my daughter's a soccer player. She wants to go to college and play soccer. You know, she talks about it constantly. And I tell her, you better be practicing soccer every day. Like, the kids who are going to go to, you know, North Carolina or Washington or, you know, University of Idaho, wherever, Missoula, those kids are out working the kids who, you know, you can't just dream it. You got to go do it. And so that's a message in our home.
Yeah.
And then, you know, just in general, like, I think I've coached some youth sports, and probably my favorite part of it is like pumping kids up. Um, I think we all need that. I needed that. I wasn't like super confident as a kid or anything. Um, I kind of got I kind of developed my confidence over time. But I think those three things that you mentioned are super important. Just the hard work, a clear direction of what you're trying to achieve, trying to stay on that path. Oh, you know, I'm not saying tunnel vision, but, you know, don't go in all the directions.
Yeah.
And then just, you know, I think for kids, like, you got to find a way to, you know, pump these kids up, and you know, make them believe they can achieve it, you know?
Jeremiah, I got to say, so I trust Brian. And so when he said, hey, we're going to bring this brewer on, I'm like, all right, cool. But when I woke up this morning, I'm like, I'm not sure what this conversation's going to look like. I didn't, you know what I mean?
I
It's like,
wasn't either.
how we going to make this make sense? But
I'm like, what are we going to talk about?
but here's the thing. What you just said, for our educators who are listening, I hope they take that piece to heart, because I think one of the most important jobs we have in education is to pump those kids up.
Mhm.
Not 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 just say, "Oh, great job, buddy," but like truly believe in the kids and their abilities, and
Yeah.
help them develop the confidence to go out and face the world. And if nothing else was said, which by the way, a lot has been said that is valuable. I got tons of notes, but that idea is one that I think is core to education. And I think very often it's missing because teachers get tired, and they get tired of the same old, and very often they lose faith in the children, but probably more important than them in themselves, to be able to pump those kids up. And it's just so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think about it all the time, honestly. Like, everybody has their unique talents. All kids have talent in some form, shape, but I do see, like, a lot of these kids, like, that I just see, I know that maybe nobody, maybe they're not getting pumped up. Maybe they're not realizing, hey, like, you know, maybe you're average at math, but look at your art skills, or I don't know. It's just, I
Yeah, I
think,
think the pumping up, if I can interrupt you quick, and I do know that we need to kind of start wrapping up here, but I think what we're talking about and what I don't want the message to be, pump up is not rah-rah. Pump up is not
no,
a false like belief in something, but it is essentially going back to what you said in the very beginning, it's connection. Pump up is connecting with a kid to see them and say, I noticed this about you. You're not good at math, but you are really good at like distilling an idea. Your art is really great. You're super creative. Like whatever it is, pumping up does not need to be this loud music. It can simply be speaking into somebody. I see you, and what I see is quality, and I think you can make a difference. That pumps the
yeah,
hell out of somebody.
yeah, I think the connection's huge. Like, if you can connect with someone, I mean, I do this on my team all the time, like, connect with that individual, talk about their strengths, talk about what they want to achieve, and then, be there along the way, because it's never smooth sailing. This the entrepreneurship, which I talked about, it's, you know, above water, it's like that old meme everyone has, where above water, it's like, you see me and I got a nice house, a nice truck, and everything looks great. Well, underwater, I'm paddling like a madman to try to keep it all working. And that's how anything in life that, you're trying to achieve is,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, that's good.
So, and I
That's
was
good.
lucky. In education, like, I was a kid who tested super well, always was a top test scorer, not a good student, never had great grades, none of that. And at one point I had an administrator, I wasn't doing good in school, and the administrator told me to my face, he's like, "I looked at all your test scores and you are too smart to not do better." And I mean, I could not ever forget that.
Hmm.
And that kind of started pumping me up. And then I just want to add too, my wife's dad was a educator for 40 plus years. We have quite a few educators in our family. And so I know what you guys do is tremendously difficult. And, it's so freaking important. Like, I don't know what I can do as a brewer to help,
Free beer.
but
Free beer.
yeah, I could
Especially
use
for the
free
teachers,
beer.
administrator. Yeah, what? Hold on. I know we're going to wrap this up, but I do want to jump in and say a couple things quickly. First of all, Jeremiah, to your point, and to Brian's point of making clear what pumping up means, very often it means telling a kid the truth. Here's what you're good at. Here's where you could be better. And I remember that from a college professor I had when I wrote a paper and he put red all over it. It looked like a murder scene. And it was like, you could do better. And I was like, I can? I didn't know I could. And he's just like, you could do better. Do better. And the other thing is, so we, our last episode, we had Barry Schurtz on, one of the great psychologists of the last 30 years. And today we have Jeremiah Johnson, a brewer in Great Falls. And both of them said the same thing, which is making personal connections is how you're going to succeed. And I think that says so much.
Yeah. Yeah. It's how you're going to succeed, and it's how you actually make change and impact the world for a positive, is through connections. Jeremiah, here's what we do. I first and foremost, I think all of us woke up this morning a little bit like, I don't know how this is going to go. but I also believed in just, I trust Kasey. I trust us, and the little that I know about you, I just knew that if we sat down, we'd have good things to talk about. And this is why I wanted you on, because for my local community, your name's everywhere. You make a difference. My fridge has your name in it, and so I appreciate the craft that you create. And I just wanted to be a part of your story and hear your story. So I just thank you for making the time and for trusting this weird Shirts and Ties podcast and coming on in the morning. But we also end our episodes with just a takeaway. Kasey will share his, I'll share mine, and then we'd love to just kind of, if you have any parting words, we'd love to hear what you have to say. But takeaway for today, Kasey, what do you got?
Yeah, so I just jotted down 3 things that I thought were crucial to the story you told, and that I think make a lot of sense in education. And one of them, you talked about really focusing in on some core skills or core concepts and making sure that you're great at those and you're consistent with those. You also talked about the iterative process of trying and trying again. To expand your skill set, it takes a little practice. It takes a little work. And it's hard work, that iterative process of making something better. And I appreciate that you talked about that. And then the last one, of course, is valuing the role that others play in this process and experience. And I think if teachers were comfortable with those 3 things, I think they'd be better for it. So thank you, Jeremiah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to emphasize the connection piece. And as we're kind of talking, we tend to think of it's my job to go make a connection so that I can inspire a child, so I can help my fellow teachers, so I can whatever. But I also maybe want to emphasize the importance of allowing connection, which is opening yourself up enough to allow somebody to look at you, Kasey, and say, Kasey, you need to be more like Brian, right? Like that you have to be better. But I mean it more of like, for my own self, as a middle-aged man with a father and a husband and roles of responsibilities, it's hard for me to open up. It's hard for me to allow somebody to sit me down and look me in the eye and say, I need you to be better. Oftentimes when that happens, I get super defensive. I don't receive it well. And so connection means going and finding connections, speaking to people's hearts, but also allowing them to speak into yours. So I appreciated that reminder. But I also wrote down, when you talked about the tough times, I really appreciated that. When times are tough, there is probably a time and a place to get creative, to think outside the box. But there's also probably more so a time to say, it's not time for that. It's time to dig deep. Who am I? What is my identity? And these tough times are not going to shift my core convictions and who we are. We're going to stand firm in who we are, no matter the swirling of the winds and the harshness of the times. We are no nonsense Jeremiah Johnson, and that's who we're going to be no matter what. And that to me was pretty inspiring. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's big.
So, Jeremiah, thank you so much again. We appreciate you. Anytime people are in the state of Montana, please, if you see a grocery store, if you see a Kalispell or here in Great Falls, find Jeremiah Johnson beer. It's some of the best, and we appreciate it. And I appreciate all the more knowing that it's being brewed by a man of character and who believes in changing the world and helping people. So thank you, Jeremiah Johnson. We love you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremiah. I hope to get to Great Falls soon, and maybe we can have a true barstool where the 3 of us sit down, shooting the shit,
Absolutely,
and having a good time. So I think that'd be great.
I would love to do it, and thank you guys. And I think what you're doing is tremendous, and just keep getting after it.
Thanks. Appreciate you.
It.